What's happening? What's good? What's going on? Part of my presence YouTube channel. Breaking news. This just out of LA. The Canadian rapper by the name of Tory Lanez has just been sentenced to 10 years in prison for the shooting of Meg The Stallion. Now, this is what we're hearing from the news stations and from news articles, but you and I both know, because I did a video on this a while back, that that's not exactly what Tory Lanez was charged and found guilty of. Tory Lanez was charged with three different crimes. Okay, I'll list them for you. It's carrying a loaded unregistered firearm in a vehicle, that's one. Second one is discharging a firearm with gross negligence, and the third one, which is probably the most important one here, is an assault with a semi-automatic firearm. Now, most people allude to that third charge of the assault with the firearm as the reason why they could say that he shot Meg The Stallion, but that's not entirely true, because if you look at the California Penal Code in regards to assault with a firearm, especially when it's a semi-automatic firearm, you don't even have to prove that you injured anyone. You could be convicted of that particular crime even if you didn't touch or otherwise make physical contact with your victim. So that's very important, because when you look at the prosecutors and how they made their case, it was very easy. And for whatever reason, it didn't seem like either Tory Lanez was aware of what they were fighting or his legal defense wasn't aware of what they were fighting, because the prosecutors, all they had to prove was that it was Tory's gun, he was in possession of it, the gun was discharged, and it was discharged in a way where it could be considered as menacing or negligent. And that's all they had to prove. They didn't have to prove that he intended to shoot Meg The Stallion, that he aimed it at Meg The Stallion. None of those things even mattered. Matter of fact, Meg The Stallion being the victim was irrelevant in the situation. I'll explain. All they had to prove was, one, who was in possession of the firearm, whose firearm was it? And they spoke to Kelsey will understand, and Kelsey said that it was not her gun, it was Tory Lanez. They also had one of the stylists who apparently went in Meg The Stallion's bag and Kelsey's bag, and he confirmed that he did not see a gun in their possession. So in other words, and then you have Meg The Stallion who said that it was Tory Lanez who shot her. So in other words, you have three people saying that it was Tory Lanez. The other two people that were in the vehicle was Tory Lanez himself, and he didn't speak at all. He didn't take the stand to defend himself. Then you have the bodyguard who disappeared, who was nowhere to be found. And then you have the star witness who saw everything from either his balcony or from his front window, who said that there was two girls who were arguing and fighting. It was really violent. Then the man got involved, the gun appeared, the gun went off, but he can't confirm whether or not Tory Lanez actually shot Meg The Stallion, or that Tory Lanez was holding the gun when it went off. He wasn't able to say that. But here's the thing, he doesn't really have to at that point, because this is why it was important that Kelsey had immunity, because the immunity was to protect her from the fact that the gun was either in her possession or Tory Lanez's possession at the time that it went off. So in other words, if the witness was saying he doesn't know who had the gun, but one of the two had them, then in other words, if you can't point at Kelsey, then you can only point at the other person involved at the time who may have had possession with the gun, which was Tory Lanez. And this is why everything pointed towards Tory Lanez. Now, here's the other thing as well too. The fact that they needed to have Meg The Stallion understand to prove that she was actually injured in her foot, and that not because she was injured, but the fact that when the doctor came on the stand and mentioned that he took out fragments from her ankle that were bullet fragments, that was what they needed to prove, the fact that a bullet had been discharged. And the reason why they know that, because it was lodged in her foot. So in other words, that proves that it was discharged. The witness proved that it was discharged. They proved that the gun belonged to Tory Lanez. So in other words, everything pointed towards Tory Lanez. And the fact that the gun was discharged in the I guess you could call it, in the moment of a heated verbal exchange, a violent exchange, an exchange that you could say there was a fight and it was menacing and there was yelling, then that is where you could attribute it to assault with a semi-automatic firearm. And this is why Tory Lanez was found guilty. It's not because the prosecutors proved that he shot Meg The Stallion. It's not because the prosecutors proved that he pointed a gun and intended to harm Meg Thee Stallion is the fact that based on all of the technicalities and what he was actually charged with, he was found guilty. Now, having said all of that, let's take a look at what happened after the guilty decision, and the fact that he now had to wait to be sentenced because apparently it was delayed for months upon months upon months. There was supposed to be a sentencing back, I think it was in November, and they kept pushing it back to look, it's 8 months later, and so now they're giving the sentence. But what has happened between then? Tory Lanez has changed lawyers, he's changed different defense tactics, he's given multiple explanations as to what happened. He's been making pleas that his life is in the balance here, and he needs to be protected and he should be spared. All these different things that he had the opportunity to take a plea deal prior to them going to court. All of these things that he should have thought about before he actually took it to trial. He didn't even think of the fact that, you know what, if I lose this case because they don't have to prove that I actually shot her, what are my odds for actually defending myself? And he couldn't, not based on what he was charged with. Now, here's a very important fact that people need to understand. If you're someone who earns a lot of money, has a lot of bank, and is able to pay for a high-priced lawyer, the high-priced lawyer will tell you anything you need to hear to keep the case going. And if that means taking it to trial, even though they might not have a chance in hell, but they'll tell you that there's a possibility, because of course there's always a possibility. They can never guarantee it, of course, but there's always a possibility that you could be found not guilty. And they're going to ride on that possibility. They won't tell you the percentage of the possibility, but they're going to ride on that, and they're going to take your money. As long as you could pay and cover the billing of the hundreds and hundreds of hours that they're going to put in and milk you for, they will take the case. That's exactly what happened in Tory Lanez's situation, because in my opinion, he either could have taken the plea deal, and then I know the worry was, well, if he's taking the plea deal, then he must be guilty. It will look bad in the eyes of public opinion. But at the same time, when you think about it, he could always have said, look, I didn't shoot Meg The Stallion. The gun was mine. The gun was illegal, it was unregistered, it was found in the vehicle, that's a charge, so I decided to take my charge. I don't know what you think happened that night, but I am not the one who pulled the trigger or shot Meg The Stallion. He could have said all that, he could have been possibly telling the truth, right? And then it would have been up to Meg The Stallion and Kelsey to tell their story if they wanted to. But that would avoid the trial from being public. That would avoid for all of these people making deals behind closed doors like Kelsey. And then you have the eyewitness who changed sides. So you have all different things that never would have happened if you took the plea. Now, the other thing that he could have done was taking the stand. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but no one agrees with me with this. But in my opinion, this is the thing. There's a lot of shaky things that were said during the trial. Meg Thee Stallion's testimony, again, I don't feel it was that credible because she's already lied and is on record lying and changing the stories many times. On top of that, you have Kelsey who changed her story, and it was revealed that she was given immunity to say certain things and escape certain charges. The same charges that Tory Lanez was charged with. She escaped those, right? So if I was Tory Lanez, I would have taken the stand and explained exactly what happened, because the jury is hearing all of this and then hearing from the eyewitness who wasn't able to pinpoint that Tory Lanez actually pulled the trigger and aimed it at Meg Thee Stallion, and also the DNA didn't have any of Tory Lanez's fingerprints on the weapon either. So in other words, Tory Lanez knows what happened that night. If he would stand and explained his side, he might have to go into full detail, but explain the holes, so that way there's a shadow of doubt as to what actually happened that night, who actually had the gun, who pulled the trigger, because what we do know is that there was a fight. And it wasn't between Tory and the women, it was between the two women. And he could have explained why they fought. He could have explained a motive as to why one of the girls would have pulled a trigger aiming at Meg Thee Stallion. So he had the missing link. But I guess because he's a rapper, he doesn't want to be labeled as a snitch, and he definitely doesn't want to snitch towards a female, because that would look even worse. So I guess he'd have to take, everything on the chin and not even testify. That is his right to do so. He doesn't have to, but I would have in that case, because that would have created enough doubt to be found not guilty. But the worst part about this, if Tory Lanez didn't want to point fingers at another woman, if Tory Lanez didn't want to make any excuses, he wanted to accept responsibility, then why all of the things that he did afterwards was trying to either get out of the situation, file an appeal saying that things were done wrong, blaming it on Rock Nation, make all kinds of accusations, apparently bribing people. All of those things were used in the sentencing, and it just shows how much of an attempt Tory Lanez made to get out of these charges and get out of a large or heavy sentencing. So I don't think that makes sense. If you're the person who wants to say, you know what, I'm going to take the charge, I'm not going to blame anybody else, I'm not going to point fingers, I'm not going to snitch, then you got to shut up and take that charge and just say, no, I'm going to accept the charges, I'm going to accept the ruling by the juries, and I'm going to do my time, and I would like to be show my remorse, and I also want to be given mercy based on me showing my remorse. He could have done that. He didn't. He refused. He fought. He pulled. His father made a spectacle outside of the courthouse. So all of these things gave ammunition for the presiding judge to stick it to Tory Lanez. That's exactly what the judge did. And the judge didn't waste no time in this particular matter, and he made sure that Tory Lanez got 10 years. Now, apparently, it was between 3 to 12 years for that particular offense of the semi-automatic assault with semi-automatic firearm. So in other words, he got almost the maximum in this particular situation. So that's kind of tough, right? So they didn't take it easy on him at all. Meg The Stallion made a statement saying how she doesn't want him to be spared or shown any mercy. He had a whole bunch of people who spoke on Tory Lanez's behalf, trying to make it seem like Tory Lanez is a great guy, but also they wanted to give excuses as far as him having issues with alcohol and him going to rehab as opposed to going to prison, all the different things. But again, the judge made a good point. If you're saying that all of this was due to being an alcoholic, but what is it that you did? Because you didn't admit to anything. You didn't show any remorse. You didn't give any explanation as to what happened. So how can you blame alcohol for something that you said was never even done? Right? Or you never even get an explanation as to what you've done. And this is where everything fell apart. And this is why I believe Tory Lanez should have taken a stand and fill in the blanks, spoke up for himself, and told his side of the story. It didn't have to be correct. It might not have to be truthful, but it had to be enough. Because again, I say not truthful because none of the other girls were telling the truth, and that was proven. But it should have been enough to cast doubt as to who had the firearm, who shot the firearm, or rather who discharged the firearm, and who was responsible. So at that point, if you create enough doubt, you could be found not guilty, because that's something that was a possibility if he was able to throw his side of the story into the mix. But you let me know how you feel about this. Are you sad about this conviction? Do you feel that this is a wasted talent? Do you feel that this is a sad story and that this is someone, or do you feel that this is someone who should have known better, someone who's a hothead? The way I look at it, it's almost like it's poetic, because here is a guy that you could consider to be at the top of the world, at the height of his fame, being at the Kylie Jenner's house. He has a choice between Meg The Stallion and Kylie Jenner, and one wrong move and you end up going to prison for 10 years. Who would ever thought you trying to finesse, choosing between Kylie Jenner and Meg The Stallion as who you're going to have sex with in the pool, and 2 hours later you are now in jail fighting these charges, the scum of the earth, an abuser. Your career is over. You might get deported back to Canada, and you can't do anything more for 10 years. So this is a sad story. This is something that you could take back and look over it and say, does it make sense to even carry a firearm when you have a bodyguard there? Or does it even make sense to protect people when it's your life that's in the balance? Or maybe you should just play it cool and not be a hothead. You don't need to carry a firearm. You're in Beverly Hills, or I believe it was Calabasas. None of those things are required. Let the security guard carry those things. and you go and do what you need to do with Meg Thee Stallion or Kelsey or Kylie Jenner, or even have a threesome. Who knows? You can live another day to talk about it and to brag about it and go on your merry way and continue making music, right? But unfortunately, that's not what happened. So rest in peace to Tory Lanez's career. Who knows what's going to happen, but I'm not waiting to hear any more music from him after 10 years drops, that's for sure. So you let me know how you feel, like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Until next time, next move, best move, part of my presence YouTube channel. Peace.